With Evelyn, Orpheus, Lucia, Yidhari, and Monado all arriving soon, it feels like every new update is competing for your pulls. But today's video is not about who to pull, it's actually about how overpowered Evelyn really is. Well, actually, to be more accurate, it's about Heartstring Nocturne, Evelyn's signature W-Engine, which is actually far more insane than most people realize. Before we go further though, if you find today's video helpful, or if you learned something, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Now before we continue, let's take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends, and in particular, one of their biggest collaborations yet. Raid is partnering with Paramount to bring the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles into the game as full legendary champions, and that means Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, Michelangelo, April, and even Shredder are all playable. Here's how it works. From August 21st through November 13th, you'll be able to collect all 6 TMNT Champions, and to start things off, just logging in for 7 days will unlock Michelangelo for free. He's a tanky debuffer who spreads negative effects, taunts enemies, and even dodge attacks, but the important part here is that October 30th is the final date to begin the 7-day unlock for him, so make sure you don't miss this window. From this point, you can then fuse Donatello, who specializes in healing allies and reducing cooldowns, and you'll then be able to get Leonardo, Raphael, April, and Shredder in limited time events. There's even an exclusive dungeon where you can battle Shredder himself to earn the Chronophage gear set, and collecting all 6 TMNT Champions unlocks an additional bonus reward, making this crossover both nostalgic, powerful, and rewarding for long-term players. Now, if you're a new player, this is also the perfect time to join, and using my link in the description or scanning the QR code on screen will give you an immediate starter pack, including the legendary champion Corrado. On top of this, as you progress, you'll unlock Epic Ugo at level 10, Epic Vergus at level 20, and Epic Tagore at level 30. To make things even better than this, however, new players can also claim another legendary champion by using one of 4 promo codes. You can use Monkey King for Sun Wukong, Get Alice for Alice the Wanderer, Tree Hugger for Green Warden Ruark, Desert Queen for 2 Hanarok. All of these offers though are only available through my link, so make sure to use it, otherwise you'll miss out on everything I just mentioned. Huge thanks again to Plarium and Paramount for making this happen, and click the link below or scan the QR code to start collecting your TMNT Champions today. Now to start things off, a disclaimer, since of course pull value videos are subjective and every account and situation is different. Today's video is intended to showcase the power and strength of Heartstring Nocturne. However, ultimately, the value that this provides can be compensated for by being an insane gamer, and alternatively, you might just find limited W-Engines to be worthless since it could cost you money. In general though, today's review will be based on the average gamer who wants to clear content at a reasonable pace and also wants some insight on how good certain W-Engines are on specific agents. With this out of the way though, let's continue forward by talking about Evelyn the agent and not her W-Engine. Evelyn herself has plenty of strengths. She's arguably the best partner for Seed prior to Orpheus's release, and she stands out as the strongest attack agent choice in most fights. Her damage skyrockets thanks to her 5+ and 6 chain combos, which can absolutely destroy bosses. However, she's not flawless. Evelyn can feel a bit awkward to play without limited partners, and her true potential really only shines when you commit to learning her special techs, swap cancels, timings, and shoulder-to-shoulder techs. On top of this, while she's undeniably strong, anyone looking to pull for Seed will likely have Orpheus to cover most Fire Week fights going forward, and truthfully, there aren't that many Fire Week encounters to begin with, which further diminishes just how useful Evelyn can even really be. That said, Evelyn is still the best choice in most cases when you need an attack agent or someone that is fire-based, and as a result, if you haven't built Soldier 11, you aren't planning on pulling for Orpheus/Seed, and you have Lighter and or Astra, Evelyn is actually a really solid pickup. That said, this isn't a video about how good Evelyn is, we're actually here to talk about Heartstring Nocturne. Now let's get into why Evelyn's W-Engine, Heartstring Nocturne, is actually so strong. To start with, and this is something that sometimes gets overlooked, limited W-Engines in modern gachas actually have a higher chance to be pulled compared to limited character banners, and on paper, while that might not seem like a huge deal, when you factor in the long-term costs of pulls and the reality of losing multiple 50/50s, having a 75-25 chance to pull a W-Engine makes the difference add up very quickly. In practical terms, this means that you're far more likely to secure Heartstring Nocturne with fewer resources than you would when chasing a limited character or their mindscapes, which already makes this one of the more premium investments that you can make when it comes to gacha games. Now, monetary value aside, Nocturne also offers an insane amount of free stats with crit rate and crit damage, both of which are premium for attack agents. On top of this, it has the highest base attack value shared with all S-rank engines at 713. Even at a base, it's already pulling ahead of most A ranks from the raw attack increase alone. Now, additionally, although this engine is tied to Evelyn's banner, it isn't just good for Evelyn, it's basically the best option for every current attack agent in the game, assuming you don't pull for their signature. This means future attack agents who simply need raw stats will almost certainly find value in this engine as well, and fire attack agents that rely on ultimates or chain attacks, which is definitely not rare or uncommon at all, will also get massive value from this engine in the future. Now, even beyond fire-focused characters, Heartstring Nocturne's value also extends to agents like Yi Xuan, who often need crit rate in their builds. With this, if you were considering something like Cannon Rotor or any other crit rate based alternative, Heartstring Nocturne actually outperforms, or at the very minimum, matches them, since it has a 24% crit rate base just as its main stat. This is really part of what makes this W-Engine so crazy, however. ZenlessZoneZero can sometimes offer limited options when it comes to W-Engines with an ideal main stat that would help with building your agent, but if you have something like Heartstring Nocturne, the raw stats alone can actually be way more helpful than you think, not just in terms of performance, but also in terms of building the character. Now, to add to this, unlike other W-Engines that require you to activate aftershocks, maintain a dodge counter, or repeatedly use quick assists to keep buff uptime, Evelyn's W-Engine also just gives a decent amount of stats, assuming you at least match the class/role to activate a portion of its passive. Now, once active though, this does mean that you can receive at least 24% crit rate, 50 crit damage, and a high attack base, even if you aren't a fire-based attack agent. Now, before diving into the next section talking about specific performance comparisons, it's important to establish some context. Heartstring Nocturne, of course, is a powerful W-Engine, but it's not universally compatible and perfectly synergistic. Many of the characters I'm about to mention can't actually use it properly, and this could be for a number of reasons, including their element, their role, or other gameplay factors that limit its effectiveness. It's worth remembering that an engine like this will almost never outperform an S-rank limited agent's own signature W-Engine. That's by design, and developers simply aren't going to release an engine that completely overshadows the one meant to synergize with its banner character. Instead, Heartstring's strength once again lies in its versatility and the stats that it provides to basically any agent. Now let's talk more specifically about numbers and performance on agents. Looking at these results, a few agents actually prefer using Heartstring Nocturne or another S-rank option like Brimstone in comparison to their signature. With this, agents like Anton gained a 13% increase in performance when using Nocturne over his signature, Corrin gained a 9% increase through her DPS compared to Housekeeper, Soldier 11 gained a 10% increase when using Nocturne over Brimstone, and to be clear, this one makes sense since she can actually use its passive, and finally, Billy also had a decent increase in performance compared to even Starlight Engine Replica, with it being 4% better compared to his alternate options. Before we go further, I would also like to point out that of course, these results may vary a little bit depending on whether you choose to use Brimstone or the actual agent's signature. Now, from these alone, however, Heartstring Nocturne already appears as a meaningful improvement for a handful of agents, but as I'm sure you can also tell, these are non-limited agents, and therefore we should instead take a look at how Heartstring Nocturne compares to pullable limited W-Engines instead. With this, let's start by talking about Zhu Yuan. Zhu Yuan is notorious for having one of the worst signature W-Engines in the game, since the passive, including skill damage and 15% crit rate, isn't really that insane on Zhu Yuan, especially when compared to something like Brimstone, which does actually offer comparable, if not better results when equipped. As a result, when you put Brimstone or Zhu Yuan's signature side by side with Heartstring Nocturne, the actual performance gap comes out to only be about 3%. That's a surprisingly small margin considering that one is a character-specific signature and the other is just a general stat-stick W-Engine that you can use crit rate and crit damage from. Now, because of this, the decision to pull for Zhu Yuan's signature purely for a damage increase becomes way more debatable or arguable from a value perspective, and in fact, what this really highlights is just how well Zhu Yuan can make use of Heartstring Nocturne, as she's easily one of the best candidates for it if you don't already have her signature or Brimstone, making Heartstring an extremely efficient alternative in her case. Haramasa is another unique case when it comes to his signature W-Engine, mainly because he was given out for free and most found it wasteful or unnecessary to even look at his banner, regardless if it was for his W-Engine or for the agent himself. On top of this, his signature used to serve as the old Evelyn signature, or in other words, just a bunch of free stats. However, since then, Evelyn's signature has taken over and outright improved or basically given more stats in terms of this value. However, back when this W-Engine first arrived, Haramasa's engine was actually a solid alternative for anyone who didn't manage to pull a limited attack agent signature. The value here came from its upfront crit rate bonus combined with the fairly easy to maintain additional crit rate built into its passive, and for its time, it was a reliable and efficient choice, though it was definitely difficult to justify pulling on this banner as Astra Yao and Miyabi were both around during this time. That said, even when comparing Zanshin Earthcase and Heartstring Nocturne on Haramasa himself, the gap isn't nearly as wide as you'd think, as there's only a minor 6% difference between the two engines. Now, I could go on and on about different situations, scenarios, or reasons why pulling for a certain agent's W-Engine is worth it or not worth it, but instead, here's a quick rundown of how close each agent's signature signature and Heartstring Nocturne's performances actually are. Heartstring Nocturne is 8% worse than Deep Sea Visitor for Ellen. It's also 9% worse than Steel Cushion for Nekomata, 12% worse than Severed Innocence for Soldier Zero Ambi, and 20% worse than Birdcage for Yi Xuan. Now, for those of you curious about Miyabi, I did also look into Miyabi and whether she could use this W-Engine just for its crit rate main stat, but as it's been tried, tested, and concluded, options like Weeping Gemini or even Fusion Compiler are simply much more reliable, have better performances, and don't really feel that much worse, even if you miss out on the crit rate main stat from something like Heartstring Nocturne. Now, while all the numbers I just mentioned earlier clearly show that each limited agent's signature W-Engine outperforms Evelyn's, it's important to look at this from a more broad or general perspective. The greatest difference that you'll find here is about 20%, and that's for a character who doesn't really have any strong alternatives to Heartstring Nocturne. Yet even in Yi Xuan's case, Heartstring Nocturne still comes in as the second best option by a decent amount, and for everyone else, the performance difference usually falls in a competitive range compared to their signature, and this is one of the final best parts of Heartstring Nocturne. Instead of needing to chase multiple signatures across different banners, getting a single engine that's very competitive to their actual best in slot is incredibly valuable. Now, when you also consider the cost of pulling across multiple banners, having any way to lessen this amount, including just pulling from one engine that's pretty versatile, is actually pretty crazy value. Now, despite all of the strengths that I've listed / associated with Evelyn's W-Engine, there is still the most important question of all: does this actually make it worth it to pull for Heartstring Nocturne? Well, there is objectively no correct answer here, but from the testimonials of players that I've encountered and from the countless number of commenters who complain about how hard it is to reach certain stat lines / builds, the answer is honestly yes. Pulling for a W-Engine that will be great for most current and future attack agents is pretty insane. There really aren't many other W-Engines like this, with the closest, most versatile comparison you could make to this being something like Lighter's Blazing Laurel for fire or ice agents, Caesar's Tusk of Fury for basically any shield having defense agents, or even Yanagi's pre-nerf Time Weaver for most anomaly agents. This W-Engine is still good post-nerf, by the way. That said, another real factor that I find to be crazy about this W-Engine is just the fact that they decided to give so much raw stat that has no conditional requirement to be met. By comparison, other W-Engines may require you to have aftershocks in your kit, use your dodge counter in order to maintain a buff, activate a quick assist every so often, etc., where Evelyn's W-Engine will just give you 50 crit damage, a high attack base of 713, and also give you 24% crit rate, all for free, which of course is obviously valuable for any character that would otherwise be using attack, crit rate, and crit damage in general. Long story short, though you are obviously free to pull and choose however you'd like, I personally believe that Heartstring Nocturne can be amazing value if you're someone who likes attack agents or plans on playing them in the future. That's going to be it for today's video though, guys. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, good luck on your pulls.